Morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, all the places at Hawk Blogger. And yeah, this morning we welcome in really the end of the 2024 season, even though it's 2025. One of the weird things about the NFL, the final game, the Super Bowl. The Chiefs play the Eagles in a game that I know a lot of folks are not that excited about, although for my money, it should be a pretty good game. And what I wanted to go over with you all this morning was looking statistically at how the Seahawks stack up. Where are they the most similar to these two teams? Where are they the most different? And I wouldn't be surprised if along the way you decide that you might want to adjust your wagers on this game, or maybe it increases your confidence in the wagers you've already made. But there are some interesting insights that I found going through this and comparing even the Eagles to the Chiefs that you may or may not have heard other places. I'm sure this game has been picked apart. If you're paying attention to any of the Eagles or Chiefs coverage, I honestly have not. But I was kind of curious, just how close Seattle is on a number of different fronts. And so we'll go through and we'll look and we'll talk about it together. I'll probably also do a mock draft because that's just what I do. But before we get started, give the show a like, click subscribe. I would greatly appreciate that. And I hope you all have a wonderful Sunday. This is the final Sunday of the football season, the NFL season, and it's a little bittersweet, like when the season comes to a close. But as you know, the off season has a lot of fun going on, and the NFL Combine here is in just a couple of weeks. I still don't know if I'm going. I have my travel booked, but waiting for credentials to be approved. And I'm hoping that I can bring Jeff Simmons along with me to help cover that. And one of the ways I do that is by having folks really support the show. So if you are a subscriber on patreon.com/hawkblogger, that's a great way to do it. There's various levels you can join at. If you want to drop me some support at Venmo, just Brian-Nemhauser, you can do it there as well. And I'm just looking for all different ways that I can help Jeff come along with me and give you guys the best coverage. So appreciate all the support that all of you guys provide each and every day. And even if you just listen and let someone else know about the show, click like, click subscribe. Those are all ways you can help the show grow. All right, so let's take a look at these teams. And this is going to be a little bit of an eye chart. I could have done something fancier, but quite honestly, didn't feel like doing it today. So I just did research a different way, a little bit more just spreadsheet style. But hopefully this is going to be something that, is a little bit interesting as we look at, you might be surprised where Seattle's similar and where they're different than the two teams playing today. So, let's take a look. You're going to see here in this view, basically we're going to look at the offense. There's 21 different stats on the offense that I'm going to talk about. And then there are 21 stats on the defense that we're going to talk about. And I'll give you a quick kind of tour here. Let me make this a little bit bigger. I decided this was maybe the best way visually to show it, but it, again, not my best design work. So, whoops, what just happened there? Oh no, what just happened? Oh, that just happened. Okay, never mind. So one of the things I wanted to do is just highlight some of these key stats. And if you look at how this shows up, I was trying to get my little on-screen brush to show, but for some reason it's deciding it doesn't want to. There it is. Okay, now I can do it. So each line here, just to give you a little tour, this is like points scored. We're going to look at offense first, where they're similar or different. And I've got the rankings, where they rank in the NFL. So I'm not going to give you the actual like raw numbers of how many points they scored or points per game, but this is just where they are relative to other teams in the NFL and their ranking. And so what you're going to see here is Seattle is this center column. That's their final rankings of the season. And then you've got the Chiefs rankings and the Eagles rankings. And from there, I've got this little handy color coded chart on either side. This one on the left compares the Seahawks to the Chiefs. This one on the right compares the Seahawks to the Eagles. Red means that the team that's in the Super Bowl is a lot better. So the Seahawks, the way to think about it is red is the Seahawks did a lot worse than that team. Green means that Seahawks did better than that team. Now, in some cases, I couldn't control exactly, unlike Google Sheets, I couldn't control exactly how to set these numbers. So you'll see some examples where the Chiefs were actually better than the Seahawks. It still shows as green. You know, we'll talk about those. But generally speaking, if you see red, that means that the Seahawks really did worse than that team in that category. If you see green, generally it means the Seahawks did a lot better or did better than that team in that category. And the degree to the depth of the color means how much different the teams were. So as you start out, points scored seems like a pretty important category. Let me zoom in a little bit more for you guys as we do this. All right. So I think I can even just make it like that. It'll be easier to see. So interestingly, you know, you may or may not know this. The Chiefs weren't exactly like a powerhouse offense this year, even with Patrick Mahomes. Middle of the pack. Seahawks were similar. And Eagles were a top 10 offense. So they were meaningfully better than the Seahawks from a scoring perspective. They were also meaningfully better than the Chiefs in that regard. So that's points. Yards, kind of a glamour stat. Again, Chiefs and Seahawks are pretty similar in that regard. Chiefs were 16th, Seahawks were 14th, Eagles were 8th. So again, Eagles top 10 team, but not significantly better, I would say, than the Seahawks. When you get to yards per play, and yards per play is a stat that a lot of bettors, like a lot of odds makers, will rely on as a pretty important stat. The Seahawks were significantly better than the Chiefs. So the Seahawks were 14th in the NFL in yards per play. The Chiefs were 21st. Now the Eagles were 11th. Again, just marginally better than the Seahawks, but so far, at least, you know, through these first points, yards, and yards per play, the Seahawks were as good or better than the Chiefs in most regards, which, knowing that Patrick Mahomes exists, makes that a little bit interesting. But we'll talk about some other things that kind of even that score up or flip that score around. EPA per play. This one's interesting as well. This is where it starts to change. So the Seahawks EPA, despite some of those other stats above, 18th in EPA per play, both the Chiefs and the Eagles were top 10. So the Chiefs were 9th, the Eagles were 6th. And so this is the first place where you start to see some real separation between both the Super Bowl contenders and the Seahawks. So EPA per play is one way to look at offense. Success rate is another way to look at offense. For people that don't know success rate is about how much yardage you get on each down, first down, second down, third down, and how much of that percentage of yards you needed to gain did you get. So it's kind of for me, it's a very good efficiency stat. It generally tracks pretty similarly to EPA per play, but EPA per play has a little bit more, is a little more impacted by things like turnovers. And so that's part of where the Seahawks really fall short. We'll talk about that in a second. But if you get to success rate, Seahawks are 15th. They were kind of middle of the pack. Eagles were just 13th in success rate. But the Chiefs were 8th. Now, how do you get to be 8th in success rate, 9th in EPA per play, but, you know, middle or lower part of the pack in points, yards, and yards per play? Well, you do that with these two numbers right here, third down and fourth down conversion rates. The Chiefs were second in the NFL in third down conversion rate. They were third in the NFL in fourth down conversion rate. Now, what does that mean? It means that you can be kind of a crappy team on first down and second down, but if you're able to convert third down and then if you need to, fourth down, then your drive continues where other drives end. And I think we've all seen this. This is where the Patrick Mahomes effect really comes into play. To some extent, the Andy Reid effect. But what you really see here is a team that offensively, they're really hard to get off the field. Like, that's the thing. This is the number one thing that makes the Chiefs, at least on offense, is when push comes to shove, getting them off the field is not an easy thing to do. Now, the Eagles, they're not bad either. They are 10th in third down rate and 4th in fourth down rate. And if you remember, I told you this when there were the 4 teams left in the NFC and AFC championship. They ranked 1, 2, 3, and 4 in fourth down conversion rate. Now, the first and the second teams didn't make it, but still the third and the fourth teams did. Fourth down conversion rate is increasingly becoming a critical part of how you become a championship team, because teams are increasingly willing to go for it, and it increasingly has an impact on their ability to win games. So that is a huge, massive, maybe the biggest difference between these teams on offense, because these teams were both top 10 in both third down and fourth down conversion rate. The Seahawks ranked 24th in third down, 22nd in fourth down conversion rate. Now, you might say, well, that sucks. We're kind of screwed there. Well, let me tell you, there's at least some reason for optimism there, because if you look at the Saints, I've told you this number before, and maybe you forgot about it. The team that averaged the most yards, the team that averaged the third most yards on third down this year, third and short especially, were the Saints. And so if you look at how the Saints did in third down conversion rate, they were not great. They were 28th. If you look at fourth down conversion rate, they were 16th. So they were better than the Seahawks in that regard. But if you get to like short yardage, that is where the Saints actually were pretty darn good and significantly better than the Seahawks in that regard. So why does that matter? Well, Clint Kubiak was dealing with tons of injuries. He was dealing with a rookie quarterback in Spencer Rattler, who's not very good. He was dealing with a lot of injuries on his offensive line. And he still managed to have one of the best third down and short or fourth down and short offenses in the NFL. That's something that should be hopeful or encouraging for Seahawks fans. Now, the other thing that I think people assume is that these teams must be also great in the red zone. But interestingly, if you look at this, they weren't. The Chiefs were 22nd in the NFL in red zone conversion rate. The Eagles were 13th, which is fine. It's not elite. The Seahawks were 18th, so they were right in the middle of those two teams. They weren't great. They weren't terrible. Even though they had the red zone interceptions are going to be something everyone remembers. But you've got a team in Kansas City who has really struggled to convert red zone possessions into touchdowns. Now, if you really look closely, I think one of the things you'd find is that the amount of red zone attempts, the Chiefs are 8th in the NFL in red zone attempts. The Seahawks were 30th. So it's one thing to be good at converting them, but volume matters here. the amount of chances you get in the red zone matter. So even though the Chiefs were pretty low in conversion rate, they had 35 red zone touchdowns. The Seahawks only had 24. It's a significant difference. And the reason is because they had so many more opportunities. And why did they get that many more? It gets back to third down and fourth down conversion rate and drive averages. So something I didn't put in here, but I can take a look at, if you look at plays per drive, the Chiefs are number 1 in the NFL in plays per drive. The Eagles are number 6 in the NFL in plays per drive. The Seahawks were 23rd. Okay? 23rd. And that's another measure of kind of efficiency. If you want to look at yards per drive, the Chiefs were 13th there. The Eagles were 11th. Seahawks were 16th, so they were a little bit closer there. And then points per drive, which is obviously a pretty important one. The Chiefs were 10th. The Eagles were 8th. The Seahawks were 21st. So again, there's some different ways that you can kind of look at these numbers, but it's important to know that from an efficiency standpoint, the Chiefs weren't great in the red zone. Next group here, rushing. This is one of the things that makes a huge difference between the Chiefs and the Eagles. The Chiefs, 22nd in rush yards, 28th in yards per rush, 13th in rush EPA. Eagles, 2-5-1. Eagles are an elite rushing team. That's not a surprise to anybody. And this is the place where the Eagles really separated themselves from the Seahawks. So if the biggest difference between the Chiefs offense and the Seahawks offense was third and fourth down conversions, the biggest difference between the Eagles offense and the Seahawks offense is rushing and rush efficiency. And we all know, obviously, that comes from offensive line, that comes from the back, that comes from the scheme, all those things, but primarily the offensive line. So this is a big one for where the Eagles kind of step forward. But I think it's pretty important to call out here. If you look at passing, which it's a passing league, right? And passing is so important and all those things. Quarterbacks are everything. If you look at pass yards, yards per attempt, completion rate, you look at those numbers, the Seahawks are pretty much better than both the Chiefs and the Eagles by significant numbers. Pass yards, Eagles are 29th in the NFL. The Seahawks are 8th. The Chiefs are 14th. Yards per attempt, the Eagles are 7th. The Seahawks are 13th. The Chiefs are 23rd in yards per attempt. We're going to get to that in a second. There's some pretty surprising things here that I think are different than what most people would expect, especially from just how people in analytics talk about what matters in football. Completion rate, Seahawks 5th, Chiefs 9th, Eagles 8th. Now, interceptions, this is a problem. Interception rate, no surprise, given how things went for Geno Smith and the offense this year. The Seahawks are 26th in interception rate. Eagles were 6th. Huge difference there. The Chiefs were 12th. Sack rate. This one's interesting. Eagles were 31st in the NFL in sack rate. So they're getting sacked a lot. Like percentage of their dropbacks, they're getting sacked. And if you've seen Jalen Hurts, how much he holds onto the ball, this could be the difference in this game. If they have trouble running the ball at all, and they have to drop back in this game with Chris Jones and with Karlaftis and with what Steve Spagnuolo does on defense, Chiefs could have a really good chance to really cause a lot of havoc for that Eagles team. Chiefs aren't great either, man. They're 16th in sack rate. So, you've got quarterbacks that extend plays, and often that turns into sacks. So again, you know how good the Eagles offensive line is. Sack rate, that is a quarterback statistic. It is a quarterback statistic primarily. So even though the Seahawks are 24th, a lot of that's on Geno for holding on to the ball too long. Now, one of the things that's different is if we looked at quick pressures, which I don't have access to that number, I guarantee you, like 100%, that the amount of quick pressures that Geno Smith faced dwarfs the amount of quick pressures these other two guys faced. So quick pressures is a different look, and that's more of a offensive line stat. And the Seahawks were one of the worst. I think they were the worst in a number of quick pressures given up this year. Continuing on, passer rating, good efficiency number in some ways. Seahawks 19th, the Chiefs only 17th in that number, the Eagles 5th. EPA per drop back, you've got the Seahawks at 20th. And again, these are some efficiency numbers with passing game. And you see that the Eagles and the Chiefs do better there. But I thought this one was really interesting. If we look at explosive plays should be like, these are considered very important for any NFL coach, any analyst. The Chiefs were 29th in the NFL in explosive passes. They were 30th in the NFL in explosive rushes. It's hard to believe. It's hard to believe that they were that bad. One of the least explosive offenses in the NFL. They were a dink and dunk team. The Seahawks were 6th in the NFL in explosive passes, significantly more explosive as a passing team than either the Chiefs or the Eagles. Now, this is a counting stat. I'm not doing explosive rate, and so that's different. And when you have more pass attempts, you're going to have more explosive passes. But the point here is that explosive plays are often given as like a key indicator of quality of team and quality of offense. And neither the Eagles nor the Chiefs were good at that in terms of passing explosive plays, and they're in the Super Bowl. So it's just something to keep in mind that when people talk about explosive plays through the air, how important is that? How critical is that? I mean, it's obviously valuable, but this was surprising to me that the Chiefs and the Eagles were so low in these numbers. Explosive rush, again, the Eagles in this case were excellent. 3rd in the NFL in explosive rush rate, explosive rushes. Seahawks were 23rd, but the Chiefs were 30th. And then that last one also should become as no surprise and is absolutely critical. Both of these teams finished in the top 6 in turnovers in terms of giveaways. And so the Eagles were 6th, the Chiefs were 4th, the Seahawks were 24th. This is something you can control, and it really matters. And so when I look at one thing that, Clint Kubiak, even if he doesn't come in and have this just kick-ass offense that just runs it up and down, limit turnovers. Well, the Saints were 11th in the NFL last year in giveaways, which is pretty damn good given their injury situation and given the quarterback that they were running out there in Spencer Rattler. So I find that encouraging that they didn't put the ball in harm's way as much. And hopefully that will bleed into how the Seahawks play next year. Because if you can just limit giveaways, it can have a huge effect on your offense, on your scoring, and on your defense. It's a huge number. Maybe the most important number for the Seahawks next year will be limiting giveaways. All right, so that's offense. Let's take a look at the defense. Let's skip to the defense, all right? Let's see how these teams compare defensively. So I'll recap here in a little bit, but if you look at offense, there's some places where there's some clear differences. Now, what about defense? Again, red is a place where the Super Bowl team has done meaningfully better than the Seahawks. Green is a place where the Seahawks have done better than the Super Bowl team. And again, same numbers that we're going to look at. These are just the defensive versions. Now, points allowed, Seahawks aren't that far off. Seahawks were 11th in the NFL in points allowed this year. That last game was annoying against the Rams, and, whatever, it happened. The Chiefs were fourth. The Eagles were second. Now, I was told that it's quarterbacks that win Super Bowls, but you've got two top five defenses in this Super Bowl. And you've got Steve Spagnuolo and Vic Fangio as defensive coordinators. Sure seems like defense is pretty important. These were higher ranked defenses than they were offenses in most places, as we'll get into this. So the Seahawks, they're close. They're knocking on the door at 11 on the defensive side. Yards. Seahawks were 14th. Eagles were number 1. Chiefs 10th or 9th. So again, both top 10 in yards allowed. Both top 10 in yards allowed, top 5 in points allowed. Seahawks were 14th in yards. One of the things I want to keep in your mind is the Seahawks had a very up and down season from a defensive standpoint, and there was a good portion of this season where they were one of the worst defenses in the NFL in these numbers. So I think if they had just been the defense they were at after the bye, the last half of the season for a full season, I'm just talking personnel and scheme, I think that they're easily 3, 4, 5 spots higher in all of these categories than what they are right now. Yards per play. Seahawks were a top 10 team in yards per play. Eagles were number 1. Chiefs were 12th. So the Seahawks are right in there. EPA per play. The Seahawks were 10th. 5 better than the Chiefs, who were 15th. Eagles were 3rd. Success rate. Seahawks were 14th. Chiefs were 13th. Eagles were 1st. You getting a picture here of Eagles and where they're outstanding? Third down rate. We'll get into the situational stuff that we talked about on offense, which was a big area of issue for the Seahawks. Well, the Seahawks were 10th in third down conversion rates on defense this year. Chiefs were 26th. Yikes. Eagles 3rd. Fourth down, we talked about how important that's become as an offensive measure. Seahawks were better than both of these teams. They were 6th on fourth down conversion rate. Chiefs were 9th. Eagles were 24th. That could be a key number today. As good as the Eagles defense has been, we saw that the Chiefs are elite on third and fourth down conversion rate. Is that going to be something that is the difference in this game? The Eagles have not been able to stop teams on fourth down all year long. But the Seahawks were way better than the Eagles. They're better than the Chiefs in this number already, even with all the problems that they experienced. Red zone. Seahawks were 10th, top 10. Chiefs 8th, Eagles 5th. Seahawks are right there. It's not a big difference, especially when you consider how that middle of the season went and all the personnel changes they went through. Rushing yards. This is where there's some difference. And it should become as no surprise because one of the places the Seahawks struggled the most in the middle of the season was rush defense. And the Seahawks finished 16th in rushing yards allowed, 26th in yards per rush. Those were both meaningfully worse than the Chiefs and the Eagles. Chiefs were 8th in rush yards allowed, 5th in yards per rush. Eagles were 10 and 10. So this is also interesting just looking at this game today. Chiefs have been a pretty good rushing defense. And they've limited teams in that regard. They also possess the ball a lot. And so are the Eagles going to be able to stick to the run game? That's going to be an interesting thing today. But the Seahawks, 16th and 26th in those two numbers. They were, if you get to rush EPA, 13th. So if you get to that point, that's a little bit closer. The Chiefs 11th, Eagles 2nd. So as we continue here, looking at pass yards, you just look at all the green here. Look at how much better the Seahawks pass defense was than the Chiefs pass defense. This is a big big takeaway for me looking at this. I mean, the Seahawks were better in yards, in passing yards allowed. They were better in yards per attempt. They were better in completion rate. They were better in interceptions. They were better in sack rate significantly. Um, they were equivalent in passer rating. They were better in EPA per dropback. So that's pretty significant. The Seahawks had a meaningfully better pass defense than the Chiefs. The Eagles, the Eagles were pretty much better in every category other than sack rate. The Seahawks, everyone talks about pass rush and how important pass rush is. Seahawks had a better pass rush from a sack rate perspective than either of these teams. So I think that's kind of an interesting one to be aware of. I think the Seahawks, you'd like to see them take the ball away more, but neither of these teams intercepted the ball very much. The Seahawks were 15th in interception rate, Chiefs 16th, Eagles 13th. I think if you look at yards per attempt, I love that number for pass defense in general, how you limit other teams to really move the ball down the field. Eagles were first in that number. Seahawks were 9th, and the Chiefs were 13th. So again, the Seahawks are right there, but there's a little bit of a difference when you're talking about 9th versus 1. Eagles were the best team in the NFL at defending the pass in that regard. Seahawks were good, but they weren't great. So I think there's more to be done there. And then I'll kind of skip down here to explosive plays. We saw explosive plays on offense. We're not there for the Chiefs. But if you look at them defensively, they sure as heck limit those explosive plays. So they can get away with being a less explosive offense when they're 6th in the NFL in explosive passes allowed, 2nd in explosive rushes. Remember how explosive the Eagles' running game is. This is going to be another really good test in this game. The Eagles, 2nd in explosive passes allowed, 9th in explosive rushes allowed. They don't allow much. Seahawks were 11th and 9th. So they're right there in the middle of this group. They're not top 5. So the big thing with the Seahawks defense is there's a lot of top 10 or right around top 10, not a lot of top 5. That's the next step for them, to become an elite defense. And if you're a Myles Garrett trade fan, like you think the Seahawks should do that, that's the case to be made, is that the Seahawks with a guy like Myles Garrett would be a top 5 defense, almost certainly. So the last thing I'll point out here is turnovers. And the Chiefs only 14th in creating turnovers, the Eagles 6th, the Seahawks 17th. This was another thing. For as good as the Seahawks defense played for a lot of this season, the turnovers, both in turnovers given up and turnovers created on defense, just weren't there. The Seahawks had some really bad fumble luck this year, and then just in general did not turn the ball over, did not get the kind of pressure I feel like was necessary to affect the quarterback into some bad decisions. I think the Seahawks' quick pressure rate was not even in the top 10, even though their sack rate was pretty good. So this is just another place where the Seahawks have some room to grow. So if I kind of go back and I summarize this, what are my big takeaways from this? I look offensively. If we look at the offensive comparison, Chiefs elite at high leverage conversion situations in 3rd and 4th down. Number 2 in third down rate, number 3 in 4th down rate. That is where having Patrick Mahomes shows up more than anything else. You can have their offensive line has problems at times. Their run game is decent, but not always great. Their explosive play rate, not good. They don't have a lot of playmakers, but Patrick Mahomes just has a way of converting and keeping the offense on the field and strangling the opponent because they never get the ball. They don't have enough oxygen. So even though they are not good in the red zone, just being elite in 3rd and 4th down conversions is enough for the Chiefs offense to just be venomous and really tough to get off the field. For the Eagles, offensively, they really do it with efficiency. Like they do it with a lot of what they are different. They're a very explosive run team, and they're an excellent rushing team. So they've gotten here with, even though they have a 31st ranked sack rate, a quarterback that holds on to the ball, a quarterback that is not that good of a passer. I think he's a bottom half of the league passer. They've gotten here because they are an elite rushing team. They have a quarterback who is a rushing threat, and they have a great offensive line. So these are two very different paths. This is not a quarterback-centric Eagles team that's gotten there. You don't have to be a quarterback-centric team to get there if you've got all these other things going for you. So the Eagles get there on offense with a run game. The Chiefs get there with 3rd and 4th down conversion rates. That's where they are outstanding. The other thing that jumps out to me is that both the Eagles and the Chiefs protect the football. You have to be elite at protecting the football if you're not going to be that explosive, if you're not going to be like littered with playmakers. You cannot turn the ball over. And the Chiefs are 4th in giveaways. The Eagles are 6th. Seahawks are 24th. So turnovers, massive. If there's one thing the Seahawks could change this year, it would be their turnover rate. The next thing would be 3rd and 4th down conversion rates. And ironically, a lot of this is probably related to how good they can be at running the football and reducing the distances they have to cover on 3rd and 4th down conversions, in reducing the reliance on the pass game, in reducing the amount of volume of passes that have the chance to be intercepted. All of those things kind of come back to how well can they run the ball, I think is probably the biggest key to them being able to reduce some of those negative numbers. Defensively, the takeaway here is everyone's going to talk about the offense. Everyone's going to talk about Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown and Saquon Barkley and Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and on and on and on. But guys and gals, this is the 15th ranked offense and the 7th ranked offense in points scored, 16th and 8th in yards gained, 21st and 11th in yards per play. They're top 10 defensively in those numbers, essentially. And for the Eagles, they're number 1 or number 2. So these are two teams that, despite all the conversation about offense, they got here very much because of their defenses. And I think that's good news for the Seahawks, because there's some question, like how important is it to have a good defense? You really need these playmakers. You need guys that score points. All that's true. But neither the Chiefs or the Eagles make it here without their defenses. I think the Chiefs defense, for my money, is one of the most underrated units in the NFL year after year. Everyone just talks about Patrick Mahomes, but this is Steve Spagnuolo. Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes have exactly 0 Super Bowls when Steve Spagnuolo is not the defensive coordinator. He is so key to what they do. The other takeaway I have here is Seahawks just aren't that far off, man. 10th in 3rd down rate, 6th in 4th down rate, 10th in red zone rate. The only place where they really have some alarmingly bad numbers is yards per rush, where they're 26th. And I think that there's reasons for that. I think that the turnovers, the lack of takeaways is the other thing that I would highlight. But generally, the Seahawks defense is not that far off from being worthy of these types of conversations, especially if you think about how young they are and how this was their first year in Mike Macdonald's system. It's a pretty good reason to think that the Seahawks should do pretty well. Should do pretty well when it comes to improving and getting better in the season to come. So, curious what folks think. Any thoughts? If you haven't given the show a like and click subscribe, I would appreciate it. But I thought hopefully that was a little bit of an interesting comparison between these teams and where the Seahawks are close and where the Seahawks are not, and how that's going to affect the Seahawks offseason planning and what we're going to pay attention to. All right. So I promised you guys a quick mock draft. I'm going to use what I used yesterday because I thought it was kind of fun. This is NFL Draft Buzz, I believe is what it's called. Where is it? Well, we'll share that, and then I will share this tab. And we will do it very quickly. And we'll allow CPU trades. And I will control the Seahawks. We're going to do 7 rounds. And let me get this all set up for you guys. All right, here we go. So you can see what I'm seeing here. Let's go ahead and kick this off. So here we are at pick 18, and we've got Malachi Starks available, Luther Burden, Tyler Warren's there, Shamar Stewart there's Mike Green's there, Michael Williams is there, Walter Nolan is there, Kenneth Grant, who I know a lot of people are kind of excited about as a possibility. He is there as well. That's a lot of people available. So let's see. They offer their second round pick and a first next year. Well, we're not drafting for next year. So the Chargers offer a bunch of next year picks. Reject. Nope. Let's see if we can, are we allowed to try to make a trade? Does this allow us to propose a trade? Doesn't look like it does. That's too bad. That's a downside, but that's okay. That's okay. Interesting. Gray Zabel going at 16. They really have him ranked highly. And Princely Umenamillion. That's pretty high for him to go from Ole Miss. All right. So the Seahawks have to pick. I mean, Tyler Warren's always the guy that I think about, but Shamar Stewart increasingly is the guy I end up with in this pick. We could go, let's do this. Let's go a little different direction. Let's go Kenneth Grant, who is a just potential game changer inside. And I'm curious how this is going to look. I think him paired with Byron Murphy for the next 10 years could be dominant. And he also fills the nose tackle. I like what he could potentially do. Let's see, 350-pound guy. Let's go with a defensive tackle first. All right. And here we are at pick 50. And so now I definitely want to look at offensive line. I know that once we've gone defensive line first, I want to go offensive line. There's Donovan Jackson available. So I'm going to take Donovan Jackson here. I don't think that's crazy that he could be available. I'm curious just who else they've got from a tight end perspective. Colton Loveland is still available. I don't think that's realistic, but he's there. Let's go ahead and take Donovan Jackson. All right. So I'm taking Donovan Jackson. Next pick. There's Deion Walker going at pick 81. We're at pick 82 in the third round. And this is where I start looking at tight ends. Omar Norman Lott's available. That's an interesting one. Tate Ratledge. I mean, I don't hate that. I think some of these centers could be an option. Tez Johnson, receiver Savion Williams. Interesting names. I think wide receiver is going to dry up here pretty quickly. So if you don't take one here, you may not get one. Tez Johnson's such an interesting guy because he's going to be one of the guys that is just open a lot, but he's very small. I think he could end up being the most productive receiver in this draft. I honestly believe that, but 155 pounds is hard to get behind. I think as I'm looking at this, I think I'm going to go with Elijah Arroyo at tight end. Tough between him and Mason Taylor. I think Mason Taylor projects as a better blocker in my mind, but let's actually do that. Let's go with Mason Taylor since we did Arroyo yesterday. We're going to go Mason Taylor this time. A little bit bigger, a little bit more physical. And then we get to the 4th round. And Arroyo is still available. You could start to look at linebacker. This Chris Paul, Danny Stutzman are both interesting options there. You could go center here. I don't hate going center here. You could go quarterback here. You could like linebacker. There's Jeffrey Bassa, who you guys know I'm a big fan of. There's Jonah Monheim, center. There's a lot of interesting options here. Quarterback is quarterback's picked over, so quarterback's kind of done. So we missed our quarterback opportunity. I think what's Barrett? I don't know Barrett Carter as well. What's Barrett Carter? 6'1", 230. Projected of 4.5 40. Defensive force, 5-star recruit. 21 tackles for loss, 9 sacks, 15 pass breakups. Recognized for academic achievements, exceptional athleticism, impressive speed, change of direction, a versatile defender, excelling in run defense, pass coverage, and as a blitzer. What are his weaknesses? Undersized for a traditional linebacker, struggles to take on blocks. Run defense instincts are still developing. Tackling techniques needs refinement. He's an interesting name. I know a lot of people are big on Chris Paul. He is also a pretty lightweight linebacker. Let's do this. We're going to take another center. In this case, we've got the choice between Jared Wilson, who's 6'3", 310, and Jake Majors, who is 6'3", 315. Let me do this. I'm going to do something here for all of us. I am going to look at where these guys ranked in terms of run blocking, in terms of zone versus gap. And we're going to look at guys that during the regular season, we're going to talk about guys that are draftable this year. And let me tell you whether Jared Wilson or Jake Majors or Jonah Monheim were best in zone scheme. We're going to take the guy who graded best as a zone blocking center. Okay, so we got to wait for it's thinking. But I'm going to tell you, between those guys, Jared Wilson had the highest run blocking grade of the three. And he had an 81.7 zone run blocking grade. Gonna be tough to beat that. Where's Jake Majors? Well, so Jonah Monheim, 16. He's ranked 28th in run blocking grade. He had a 69.4 zone blocking. Jake Majors way down here. He's 41st, 63.4. Jared Wilson, you are now my number one center. Jared Wilson is the man. And again, Jared Wilson ranked 8th in FBS among centers in run blocking grade. He ranked 3rd in zone run blocking grade. So that sounds like our kind of guy for Clint Kubiak. Jared Wilson, you are a Seahawk. And you're going to become a more frequent pick for me, by the way. All right. So here we are in the 5th round. We haven't gone linebacker yet, so let's do linebacker. I think that's where I'll lean, unless there's someone else that just jumps off the back. We got Bassa. We've done Bassa a lot. Let's go ahead. Let's check out Danny Stutzman. 6'4", 241. Let's see. Really good run defender. Let's take Danny Stutzman. So first time we've picked him. Wow, a lot of people want this pick that we've got here in the 6th round. We've got a couple of 6th round picks. I'm not going to take Cam Scadaboo if you're wondering, because it's some kind of bug. There's no reason he should be available this late. We could take a running back. Jeffrey Bass is available still. That's a little bit crazy. I'm tempted to take him, but I'm not gonna. Let's see, who else do we have here? We could take Damian Martinez, who I really like at running back. There's a couple other running backs that could be options. Willie Lampkin. Willie Lampkin. We're going to take Willie Lampkin here. Very early to take him, but I think Willie Lampkin's an interesting guy that could end up being an extra lineman that you use. He could end up being a fullback even. Do I want to do that? I don't know if I can talk myself into it after taking Jared Wilson. Can't do it. All right, let's do this. Let's take, how do you feel about Billy Bowman Jr.? I don't know him that well. 5'10", 200. Don't love that. We're going to take Jeffrey Bassa. We're going to take another linebacker. I think that's a little bit of a bug in the system, but there we go. All right, so here, for whatever reason, it's wanting me to save this. I haven't finished yet. So here we are with our next pick in the 6th round. And we're going to take a running back here. We're going to take it seems like it's broken. Whatever. Okay. Fine. So with that in mind, this is the draft we got. Kenneth Grant, Donovan Jackson, Mason Taylor, Jared Wilson, Danny Stutzman, Jeffrey Bassa. Did not allow us to make our last couple picks. I got to say, that's one of my favorite drafts. If you get Kenneth Grant and Donovan Jackson, you are getting tougher on both sides of the ball. Mason Taylor as well, I think, is a really good physical player, good hands, a good bloodlines, the son of Jason Taylor. Jared Wilson, I love that at center. I think he's a better center prospect than what the Seahawks have right now. Danny Stutzman, the linebacker, and Jeffrey Bassa. So you get two, I think, really intriguing linebackers. Help on special teams, help as depth for your defense for a position that is obviously really critical. I don't know. What do you guys think? How do you guys feel about that draft? For me, that's like it's like a B+, A- kind of draft. I feel pretty good about it. First time I've taken Kenneth Grant in a while in the first round. I don't hate it. Partially because I think some of the defensive tackles you get later, not loving as much. So with that, I'm going to say, please, if you haven't already, make sure you head over to JK Boots, use code HawkBlogger, get 10% off the best boots you're ever going to own. They are made in the Northwest in Spokane, family-owned company. You not only get 10% off, but you're going to get a chance to win a Seahawks-themed pair of boots. They're designing a brand new, only for you pair of Seahawks boots. So somebody will get to win those. And we've also done a bunch of stuff for charity, already given away multiple boots to firefighters, both that protect the Pacific Northwest, forest firefighters, and the LA firefighters as well. So head on over to jkboots.com, use code HawkBlogger, save 10%. You're going to love the boots. They're amazing. All right, folks. With that, have a great rest of your day. Make sure you give the show a like and click subscribe. I will see you tomorrow. Until then, this has been episode 321 of Hawk Blogger Mornings.